What's up? It's John Crestani here, and I'm going to be talking about some mistakes to avoid when getting married. I got divorced a few years ago. I'm remarried now, but I'm going to focus this on financial decisions and stuff, but I'll also share some things from my own experience. So let's go. Number one is, a mistake to avoid is avoiding the money talk, avoiding talking about what are you and your partner's, kind of like financial goals, like income goals and wealth goals. Like, where are both of you going to feel satisfied and comfortable in terms of your personal wealth, right? Some people might freak out if they don't have at least $5 million in the bank, right? Some people might freak out if they, not care. Some people might freak out if they don't have at least $5,000 in emergency assets. Everybody's different, but you have to understand your partner's goals there, and also income. What is the goal that you both are aiming to get towards, and what is the reality, right? Because you need to know how much you need saved and how much you need to make. That's really important to figure out, how often you're going on vacation, or how you really make decisions around money. Because of course, one person in the relationship is going to be earning more than the other person, in like 99.9% of cases. Another mistake to avoid is heated arguments in general. A lot of people argue about money, saying, oh, I really want this, I deserve it, is what a lot of these millennials say, I deserve it, but the reality is, arguing about finances and stuff, it's better to cool off. When you're in like an emotional state, you're not thinking, right? Your thought, rational thought is here. Emotional thought, when you're heated, when you're like, your heart's like, I need to convince my partner I need this, or they shouldn't do this, or whatever, right? Then you're in your emotional brain. And that's not good, so you gotta cool off. You gotta take a second and come back to the discussion when it's more of a discussion in a rational, calm place, and revisit that. And that can be really hard in practice because, when somebody's like, you shouldn't do that, or somebody's like, I want this, there's a lot of emotions, and usually, both people, or at least one person, wants to stay in there and say, no, let's discuss this now. And it can get really difficult to peel yourself off of that, emotional conversation. But the reality is, it's not a good place to, discuss anything when you're sitting in your emotional brain. Another mistake is keeping financial secrets, but I just say secrets in general are pretty bad, whether it's, you have, taking sleeping pills at night, or, whether you have a problem, and you slip those, you try not to let your partner know, or whether it's, you've been purchasing some things that, like you've been making purchases that are too expensive and not necessarily within the budget, or whatever, right? That's also bad and can create problems down the road. Another one. Not having sex. Like, don't get married if you're not going to have sex, and in Jewish culture, it's like an obligation to have sex once a week. Whether you feel like it or not, whether you trust your partner or not, it's an obligation. It's part of the reason why people get married. If you're not going to be having sex, then don't begin a relationship. And in Jewish culture, if you don't have sex with your significant other for 2 to 3 weeks, the rabbi actually will, talk to you, or visit you, or, like, have a discussion to figure things out. It's that important for relationships, and it's not again, I'm going to have a controversial opinion here. I warned you, and click off this video if you don't like listening to me, or unsubscribe. Seriously, like if you don't like hearing my opinions, and if I trigger you, please unsubscribe. But it's very real, and it's a big problem in society. Elon Musk and me talk about, people aren't having enough kids, and like this is the reason people don't feel like it or whatever. But that's part of marriage. Fifth mistake, from John, so take it with a grain of salt, is, not agreeing on the number of kids you want, or at least the range, or whatever that is. Both parties, obviously I've heard of a lot of stories from women that were saying, oh, I want to have kids, but my partner doesn't. He just wants to, do this thing or whatever, not agreeing on kids. But even further, going further into that, not agreeing on what each role's, like how involved each partner is gonna be when the kids come around. I think in modern day America, women assume that the dads are gonna be like, kind of helicopter dads and, all that sort of stuff. And, the dads, assume that the woman's gonna do a lot of the work, but I don't know what people assume actually. I just know what happens in LA, in my friend group. But the reality is you gotta discuss these things. You gotta lay these things out beforehand so you have correct expectations, or else shit goes wrong. Another big one, which is one, well, I won't go into too many specific, but not agreeing on financial goals, right? If one partner wants to become rich, like super rich, and the other partner's like, oh, I'm just chill, with like a nice life, living in a, suburban 4,000 square foot house, going on a trip every quarter, stuff like that. That can be a problem because then, one partner's working a ton and always working more and trying to save money. And then the other partner is saying, we're fine. Take your foot off the gas. Let's enjoy life. Let's spend on this and that and this. Why buy an investment property when we can just, buy a worthless depreciating asset because it looks cool, So you got to agree on your financial goals, or you got to bring it. It's a conversation topic to have so it doesn't, it doesn't breed resentment over time in the relationship. Problem number 7 is micromanaging spending. And, going through your partner's transactions on their credit card, which is something that, I'm guilty of, and, I was guilty of in my current relationship, was, it's bad, it's bad, you need to, and if the other person's overspending or or whatever, you need to be able to operate, you need to have that discussion separately than always just micromanaging each sort of specific thing and like pointing that out. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay, marriage mistake number 8. Now, this was a controversial one. You can unsubscribe from me happily if, you can't even listen to my opinions. But having a wedding in general is stupid. I say have a party. I don't know many men who really enjoyed the wedding planning or the wedding process. I think getting people together is great, but I think spending, $50,000, $100,000, even $20,000 on a wedding, in my opinion, it's just a waste of money. It's not even a depreciating asset, but the pictures are an investment, I've never seen a wedding become a benefit to any of the relationships I've seen. Now, keep in mind, take it with a grain of salt, I'm also in California. The divorce rate is 75%. Crazy, right? But I don't see, so like a wedding, you have to even factor that in if you're having a wedding. And all the pictures are important, it's like, well, 75% of people are good. But the point is, I don't see it as a good investment. I think it's a horrible financial decision. I think a party, just have an open bar and get a bunch of pizza or some fine dining, get some music, a DJ, is a much better decision. Marriage mistake number 9 is combining finances too soon. I don't have too much experience about this one, but what I would say is that, generally, it depends on everybody's unique situation. It depends on, your investment accounts and this and that and the whatever, how complicated it is. When I got married my first time, my finances were extremely simple. I had like a bank account and I was young, a bank account and a wealth manager managed my assets. That was really it. I definitely say keeping things somewhat separated is a good thing. I think everybody should understand money management from a financial perspective. If you're spending money, you should understand how to manage it as well. And I don't think you get that as much if it's fully combined. Mistake number 10 is just not saving. Now, I grew up, my parents were from the Midwest, savings like super important. I grew up around a bunch of Jewish people in LA, and savings always been kind of part of my internal culture. It's just like save. The purpose of money is for saving, not spending. You don't get rich by spending money, you get rich by saving money, right? It's obvious. But in general, I think, everybody has different lifestyle goals and, like whatever, help the elephants and whatnot. But the reality is that, accidents happen, unforeseen things, black swans and whatnot are going to happen. And you're going to have serious issues if you don't have reserves saved for these rainy day events. You get in a car accident, you have to move somewhere because somebody got a new job, you have to put money down on, you want to start a business, any of these things, you should save to allow yourself options and opportunity in life. And if you don't, it's just going to create tension at the end of the day. It's like, I had my knee, all the cartilage wore down. And, if you don't have any like cartilage of that fatty tissue, it just creates more problems. It creates swelling, it creates aches and all that stuff. So if you don't have savings, a buffer zone, a rainy day fund, that's just there, it's going to create tensions and problems. And you can overcome all of those just by not spending money, And talking about not spending money, mistake number 11 is not having budgets. Having each partner having some sort of budget where they're, living their general life by is good. And, that was actually, having a budget was my solution to, the micromanaging of spending, in my case. Now, mistake number 12 is not having monthly relationship check-ins. Now, every month I go on a date with my wife and we check in how each person is feeling about different issues and, everything, emotional, little issues, big issues, and what I try to do is anything, instead of coming home and being like, why is it all dirty over there? Why does it smell like poop? Oh, the dog pooped over there again or whatever, It's being able to bring those subjects up. Of course, if you come home and you just are like, it smells like crap in here again, honey. Did the new puppy I bought you, poop in the house again? Of course that's going to create tension because the first thing you're saying when you enter the door is talking about, like a shortcoming of your partner. It's awful, right? So tabling those discussions for more of a month, like a monthly check-in is much better. It lowers that emotion because, if I come home and I smell poop from the new puppy, right? It's like oh, it's like a bad feeling, and then I'm unconsciously or subconsciously transferring that feeling over to said person. That's awful, and a lot of relationships get in this emotional, just like, transfer emotion back, and that's not good. So instead of being able to just breathe and write it down maybe somewhere, or whatever you need to do, or just remember it and table it for a discussion later that month, like, oh, hey, maybe it's hard, right? You hate smelling poop every time when you come into the house, but, that's good because, after 3 weeks, then you could say, hey, I think we should get a trainer. Like, is there anything we can do about this? It allows you to make much more calm and collected decisions. And here's the last one. Not having regular date nights. You know, and I've been guilty of this too, just, you know, after you get married, falling into that pattern of just like, okay, we're married, like work, 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 you know, go out, you know, do your normal thing, instead of being in that place where you're constantly flirting, you're still courting that person, you're still telling them how beautiful there is, you're still treating your wife like you're dating her. And that's why I call it a date night, because, you know, and what we do now is, I'd say we don't do it every single week, but probably at least every other week, is we're going on date nights, but taking that time to put on cologne and, you know, wear that jacket she thinks or he thinks is handsome or pretty, you know, and taking that flirtatiousness and that, you know, sexual energy, allowing that to still be present in the relationship is important. Let me know if you found any of these interesting or enjoyable, or what your thoughts were. This is a little bit of a different video from what I normally do. It's kind of personal, but I'm sure you picked up on a lot of stuff. But hopefully enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, like the video. I'd love to see your comments, honestly, on this one. And you know, if you want my book or my mentorship, there's links in the description. John Crestani, I'm out. Peace.